Hello and what is up YouTube? My name is G3 Iron and today we are in our 6th episode of our featured build of the week discussion. Today we are featuring Moosseolini's Holy Relic Guardian. This is in fact a video that you are seeing of some gameplay footage of 2 Holy Relics and one very long-necked and balding Templar man taking on Sirus, the Awakener of Worlds. And yes, this is Sirus at Awakening level 8, being taken down by one old man, one beard, and 2 holy relics. So we're going to get into the path of building as well as the skill gems and the itemization for this particular build. But of course, for those of you who are new to the channel, you are encouraged and invited to not only go and like, ding, and subscribe the bell for our channel, but go over and give Moosseolini some subscriptions and some love over there, because he does a great job of showing this off. This is a deathless Awakener 8 run. We can jump all the way towards the end of the fight, and you can see how the build and how the fight performs and progresses. Some of the pros and cons to this particular build right off from the get-go. Moosseolini is very upfront with all of the pros and cons of the build. While you can see it's a good boss killer, and this is less than a 5-minute video clip that includes all of the dialogue of a Sirus fight, so relatively fast bosser and relatively safe. You can see down goes Sirus right there in, what, 4 minutes and 40 seconds on a level 8 Atlas. Anyway, that's the bossing side of things, which of course this particular Holy Relic Guardian excels at. But some of the cons of this particular build, and Moosseolini is up front with the cons about this, and that is always one of our requirements right here at G3. If we're going to highlight and discuss a build, we want there to be clarity in the forum post or in the build guide walkthrough on what are the pros and what are the cons. Some of the cons of this build are that this is going to have limited scaling possibilities and then just straight up mediocre mapping speed. So if you're looking to go zoom really super fast, just be, you know, chaining maps left and right as fast as you can, this is most likely not the build for you. If, however, you are looking to play a build that will safely take you through the endgame bosses and take down those endgame bosses in a safe fashion, then in that case, this is the build for you. And a lot of the build options and required items for this particular build to work are actually relatively cheap, even in League presently as of the recording of this particular video. So, without any further ado, let's get into some of the setups that he's got right here. His descriptions on the skill gems are as follows. His main setup is going to be using a summoned Holy Relic, along with minion damage support, death mark support, controlled destruction, meat shield, and then brutality. So he's mostly, well, he's doing all physical damage off of his minions. And the way that this thing is going to scale up is, of course, simply by putting levels into your gems, and those levels are going to boost your damage as you get going. So if you're playing this build and relatively early on it feels a little bit lackluster, or you're wondering at, you know, level 17 or 18 or 19, why can't I take down Awakener like he showed on the video? Well, it's because you're not max level on your gems yet, and on this particular build, gem levels are incredibly important. One thing to note on this, you'll notice on his 6-link setup for his Summoned Holy Relic, he actually doesn't have an Empower to add gem levels to the Holy Relic, which means, yes, you can just do, you don't have to spend a whole bunch of exalts on getting like a top level Empower, which oftentimes many minion builds will ask you to do. Now, he's got some interesting mechanics going on here with Static Strike. So in order to activate, this is what you have to do. You use Static Strike, which you get in Act 1. And he recommends going with Smite until you actually get Static Strike set up. Then you're going to use Ancestral Call, Increase Duration, and then Fortify. That's going to be a very, very helpful buff for your character as you are going up against bosses. The utility setup is simply using Flame Dash and faster casting. That shouldn't be at all news to anyone that is a spellcaster. Also, Vol Molten Shell is rather helpful just as an extra layer of defenses along with cast when damage taken. Now, the auras that he's got set up for this are again going to be pretty classic if you're used to playing a summoner build of any type that is using brutality and physical based minions. He's going to use War Banner, which War Banner is important to use instead of using Dread Banner. Dread Banner is used in order to scale Impale effect. War Banner essentially acts as a multiplier because enemies that are near you within inside your radius of the effect of the banner take increased damage. So when anything says enemies take increased damage, it actually acts as a more multiplier in the chain of sequencing of calculating out damage in Path of Exile. So War Banner acts as a multiplier. Pride, of course, is something that's great, and the longer that you are close to something while using Pride means the more damage that they are going to take, that your minions are going to scale up their damage, and so that's perfect for boss fighting. Next up, you're going to have Zealotry, and then lastly, of course, Generosity. All of this stuff, all of these auras chained with Generosity are going to be boosting your Holy Relics. None of them are going to be boosting you because you're not doing damage. Again, one of the best ways to take on bosses throughout Path of Exile's history is to try to automate your damage in some way such that you as your character can actually move around and pay attention to the various damaging ailments and damaging abilities of various bosses. So that way your character is freed from being locked into a casting animation or even locked into a movement animation. You can simply just free roam and free run, and you really can save your charges on your flame dash or whatever chosen mobility skill of your choice. You can save those animations and those charges for a moment where you really need to panic and you really need to move around and get out of. Now, he's got leveling guides right here, which those of you who are unfamiliar with how to level, these are the three most basic uniques that you can level with. It's going to be a Gold Rim, it's going to be a Wanderlust, and it's going to be a Tabula Rasa. If you get those three things picked up, you are good to go for leveling basically up until Act 9, 10. I mean, I've leveled multiple characters this league in 3.9 Metamorph with just Wanderlust and Gold Rim. Not even used a Tabula. I only used a Tabula, I think, on one character for a few levels. So for the vast majority of the time, this will take you all the way up to maps. Now, that being said, that's in softcore. I wouldn't use this setup in hardcore. In hardcore, obviously, you're going to be upgrading your various items whenever you can in order to keep your resistances at max and your defenses at max. For endgame gear, this is where it gets really interesting. This right here is the endgame helmet that makes the whole build tick. And this particular endgame helmet, by the way, endgame I use just in quotation marks, not as a sign of disrespect to the helmet, but just as a sign that this is an incredibly budget, cheap build that can go take down the Awakener. You don't need to spend hundreds of exalts on some super duper expensive meta build. You can just go build this. Joffrey's Legacy are like one alch right now, if that. Maybe a top rolled one is a couple of chaos. But the important line on Joffrey's Legacy, the Great Crown, is that it gives you +1 to level of socketed gems, and it also gives you +1 to maximum number of summoned Holy Relics, and summoned Holy Relics have 22% reduced cooldown recovery speed. So our damage right here is really affected and impacted by having a Joffrey's Legacy Great Crown. If you don't have this particular unique, honestly, it's not worth playing the build. So if you're in a trade league, go get this. It's cheap. It's incredibly cheap right now, so now is the time to actually go play this. Make sure that you socket, here's a pro tip from Moosseolini, make sure that you socket your aura setup in here in order to benefit from the gem level, which is very, very nice. And then, of course, if you're going to enchant this, then you're going to look for Holy Relic enchants in the Eternal Labyrinth. That being said, my goodness, again, Joffrey's Legacy, there's probably a couple of those floating out there that are actually relatively cheap. You might spend a few X if it's got both the Holy Relic enchant and a well-rolled Joffrey's Legacy, but for the most part, this is going to be an incredibly cheap helm to actually get to scale up your end game damage, and this is the unique that makes this entire build tick. For body armor, because he's using two-handers, you can get away using a Comb's Heart. This is one of the reasons why, as you're watching the video, you see he's got over 8,000 health, which is outstanding on a character that is going to be relatively budget. Yes, Comb's Heart might be a bit expensive. It's usually a few X, 1 to 2 in softcore at the moment in Metamorph League, depending on the demand and depending on the various builds that are floating around. But right now, there's been no better time to purchase a Comb's Heart. It's at one of its cheapest forms of cheapest prices of any league recently, just simply based on the amount of demand that's out there in softcore for Comb's Heart and for Combs style builds. So you don't need sockets for this. He makes the point, Moosseolini makes the point of saying you don't need sockets for this because this isn't a socket starved build. There's a couple of things that you want going on, and once those couple of things are set up, you get your auras in your helmet, You get your 6-link on your staff, and other than that, for the most part, it's just utility from there on out. Faster casting, flame dash, and maybe 1 or 2 things here or there. But other than that, that's your setup. That's what you're looking for. So you don't need some expensive fossil crafted 6-link rare piece that's worth a dozen exalts. You just need Comb's Heart. You get a whole bunch of life, you stay alive, and then you go kill the Awakener at level 8. Now, the weapon that he's using is a rare crafted 6-link weapon. This particular staff is going to be important. You can either get for yourself and farm up for yourself the +2 to level of socketed support gems, craft for yourself. If you'd like to do that, you can farm that. Or what you can do is you can always go to a guildmate or to one of the trading services for somebody to actually craft this onto a staff for you. The important things that you're looking for if you're crafting this yourself is going to be the +1 to level of socketed gems, because it kind of acts like a pseudo empower without actually giving up the link of having to make an empower fit into this 6 socket, which is really, really nice. And then, of course, the +2 to level of socketed support gems boosts all of your support gems, whereas the +1 to level of socketed gems will boost both your Holy Relic as well as all of the other supports that you're including in that 6-link in order to give that damage, that extra bit of oomph that you need to take down Awakener at tier 8. For gloves, you're simply looking for life and resistances. These are going to be very, very nice gloves, simply to search for either on a live search or to search for on the Trade League, as whatever resistances that you need to slot into should not be any problem at this point in the league. We're late enough into Metamorph League now that there's basically rare gear with life and resistances that are just dropping left and right all over the place, and so the prices on these are coming down on a daily basis, making the build actually cheaper and more accessible for you to get to. The boots are going to be the same thing. It's nice to have movement speed on there, but other than that, you're just looking to fill out your resistances as well as your maximum life rolls. Now, on the jewelry for your amulet, one of the things that you are looking for that is going to be a bit pricey is going to be both the allocation of Soul of Steel, which is a passive on the tree that you can get through Blight Oil Anointment. It's one of the more expensive anointments, so you don't have to go for that. But one of the reasons why it's one of the more expensive anointments is because of how far away it is from most builds that want to grab it if they want to anoint with it. And of course, it gives you +1 maximum all resistance across the board. So rather than 75% being your maximum resistances, 76 now becomes your maximum resistances across the board, which is quite helpful. The other very expensive part of this particular amulet is that it has been influenced, and it's got +1 to level of all intelligence skill gems. This is not a socketed mod, so pay attention very clearly when PoE tells you particular mods and the wording of them. This just says +1 to level of all intelligence skill gems, which the vast majority of our skill gems that we are using in this particular build are intelligence skill gems. So we're getting another level boost from this particular rather expensive amulet. On our rings, we're looking for life and resistances. It's very, very simple. You want to look for oftentimes an amethyst ring, just so that way you can boost that chaos resistance up, because you're going to get most of your other resistances relatively cheap across the board on your gloves and on your boots. And so wherever you can jam in some additional chaos resistance, because there is so much chaos damage that's coming during Metamorph League, it will not hurt you at all. It will actually help your build considerably if you're able to negate some of that chaos resistance and get that chaos resistance into the positives rather than in the negatives. Now, on this particular choice of belt, you can, of course, go for simply life and then % maximum life increase, which is a massive, massive boost. It's worth quite a bit of life if you are to take this particular style of belt off. If you want to go ridiculously expensive, I guess you could go with a Stygian Vise that's been influenced. But if you want to go somewhat relatively budget, then you can go for simply anything that's got life on it, and then, again, fill out the rest of your various flasks. For flasks, we've got a very, very basic setup here. We've got a instant immunity to bleeding flask, as well as a couple of movement flasks, a phasing flask, of course a granite flask for flat armor, which also helps out whenever your molten shell goes off, and then you've got a basalt flask for simply percentage reduction of physical damage taken. And then you've got the Forbidden Taste Quartz Flask, which, yes, you take a bunch of your life as chaos damage on use, but you recover almost your entirety of your life when you use it. It's just like an instant, hey, here's all of your life back panic flask. And so if you boost your chaos resistance up high enough, then Forbidden Taste Quartz Flask won't actually really hurt you like at all. You won't feel it really much of at all. Okay, so that's taking a look at the gear as well as the flasks, as well as the gem setups. Let's take a look at his passive tree here, at Moosseolini's passive tree. This particular passive tree is a pretty straightforward passive tree as you look at it. Now, this is at level 95, so take this with at least a grain of salt. He's going to go and grab a whole bunch of minion modifiers on this particular build. So, of course, we're going to go grab Enduring Bond, which is going to give us skill effect duration, which also applies to our Fortify. By the way, it makes Fortify last longer, which is nice. But then other than that, we are going to be looking for lots of different life on the tree. You're going to come up, grab Purity of Flesh. You're also going to come grab Sovereignty to help with the non-curse auras that you are using, whether that's your banner or whether that's pride. Those are both going to be impacted by sovereignty. I'm going to come over, grab Spiritual Aid, grab Redemption, and of course grab Righteous Army on the way as well. Then as you make your way down towards the Scion Life Wheel, which of course is most notable for Constitution because it gives you flat maximum life and then 14% increased life, it's very, very wise for you to come and grab this as maybe your first or second thing that you do, especially if you're playing hardcore. If you're playing hardcore and your build includes the Scion Life Wheel, I generally recommend just coming down and grabbing that Scion Life Wheel first, making your way towards it. And it's not that far away from the Templar to come to the Scion Life Wheel as you start out. It's about 20 passive points to get all the way down there and get the nodes that you need. If you need damage along the way towards the Scion Life Wheel, you can come and pick up Grave Pact rather early if you're leveling with minions of any type. And of course, this is always fun to do. When you are leveling with minions, if you just want to have an absolutely ridiculous breeze of a time as you're leveling, just go and grab as many minions as you can as you're leveling. Grab like Grave Pact and maybe a few other minion nodes along the way, like you come up and you grab Enduring Bond. And then other than that, between zombies and skeletons, like Act 1 through Act 5 is just going to be a joke if you just grab those two passive nodes and those two passive wheels. And then the rest of it you just fill out with life. The game will be an absolute joke just as you level those particular gems up. You also are going to go in and get Tireless, which is going to reduce the mana cost of your skills as well as give you more life. You'll come down and eventually get Barbarism, which gives you another +1 max to your fire resistance. You'll get Resolute Technique, which means that you never crit, but we don't really care about critting. We just want to make sure that every single time we attack in order to apply Fortify, we actually make sure that we get it. And so that's why this particular build is going to use Resolute Technique. For finishing off the build, you're going to come up and grab Fearsome Force, which minions deal 15% increased damage, and then you'll make your way over to Mystic Bulwark, which gives you some block chance as well as some more mana, and you'll finish out probably up here with Cruel Preparation and maybe some elemental resistances as you need them. Enigmatic Defense is actually a pretty helpful defensive node. Again, if I was building this and I was building in hardcore, I would go down and grab the Scion Life Wheel first, and then I would make my way up towards Enigmatic Defense, just so that way I have a chance to block an increased chance to block while I'm using a staff, because you're primarily going to be using a staff throughout the course of this particular build. As you are ascending and looking to ascend, there are, of course, 4 different labyrinths for you to do. You're going to look for Time of Need, which every 5 seconds removes curses and elemental ailments from you. Every 5 seconds regenerates 30% of your life over 1 second, and then 25% reduced effect of curses on you. You can choose to get this as either your 3rd or 4th ascendancy. If you are going directly into a bunch of zones while you're mapping, and you know that this is going to be a very, very curse-heavy league, for instance, then I would grab it as my 3rd ascendancy. But other than that, I would probably push it off to be my 4th ascendancy. Really, what you want to prioritize is Radiant Crusade, which gives you 20 to all elemental resistances. And then where there are at least 5 nearby allies, you and nearby allies have Onslaught. Yes, this will give Onslaught to you and to your minions as long as you've got 5 of them. And then at least, while there is at least 1 nearby ally, you and nearby allies deal 10% more damage. So that's a more damage multiplier as long as you've got 1 Holy Relic summoned. So remember how I said as you're leveling, you can always throw zombies in there, you can always throw skeletons in there, you can throw summon Raging Spirits in there, whatever it is that you want to throw in there while you're leveling. Even your golems, if you want to throw golems in there, there's lots of different ways that you can proc Radiant Crusade to grab that. And the flat elemental resistances are very, very helpful after you kill Katava for the first time. So I would recommend grabbing this first, just so that way you've always got your elemental resistances near cap. Unwavering Crusade is the next one that you'll grab. Nearby allies deal 30% increased damage. Nearby allies have 15% increased attack speed, cast, and movement speed. Nearby allies have 30% increased area of effect, which is incredibly helpful for the cooldown on your Holy Relics Nova that they fire out. That increases their area of effect and the damage radius that they're doing. It's quite a nice piece of quality of life on a build that's already so-so on its area of effect and on its clear. So it's quite helpful to have this. Also, nearby allies intimidate enemies for 4 seconds on hit, and nearby allies unnerve enemies for 4 seconds on hit, which is fantastic because your Holy Relics are always going to be hitting, which means everything around you is going to be intimidated and unnerved. Lastly, we're taking a look at Bastion of Hope, which gives you 50% chance to block attack damage for 2 seconds every 5 seconds, and then if you've blocked in the past 10 seconds, you and nearby allies cannot be stunned. This is incredibly nice. It means that you don't have to spend passive points on going all the way down to the very bottom of the tree to grabbing Unwavering Stance, which is simply too many passive points for this particular build to get to and to reach to. And with the amount of block chance that you've got on this particular build, it's not at all unrealistic to say that you have blocked attack damage over the last 10 seconds. If you've attacked recently, which of course you will because that's how you're going to be applying your Fortify on yourself, you and nearby allies have 10% chance to block attack damage. And if you've cast a spell recently, which of course you will because Flame Dash is a spell and you'll be casting it rather regularly to either move around as you level or dodge abilities that Sirus or various other Conquerors of the Atlas throw your way, you and nearby allies have a 10% chance to block spell damage. So this is almost like a little bit of a mini phase acro sort of style of Ascendancy, where instead of dodging stuff, you're just blocking stuff, which is great, and then you get additional bonuses as you block, which is very, very nice. So I would typically go, if I'm playing Softcore, Radiant Crusade, and then Unwavering Stance, then Bastion of Hope, and then Time of Need. If I'm playing hardcore, I might go really nuts. I might go Radiant Crusade, then I might go Bastion of Hope, then Time of Need, and then finish out with Unwavering Crusade, just because damage is something that I'm not ever really worried about while I'm progressing through the storyline on Ascendancies throughout hardcore. I'm much more worried about life and resistances than I am my offensive abilities as I'm leveling through hardcore. So that's what this particular tree looks like for Moosseolini's Relic, Holy Relic Guardian. Hopefully this is a build that you've enjoyed checking out, and hopefully it's a build that you will try out for yourself. For those of you who are skeptical in any form or any way, you can once again take a look. Here are the POB stats. He's got a grand total of 8,000 life, just over 8,000 life. His life regen per second is 629. In terms of his resistances across the board, he's 77, 76, 76, and then his chaos resistance is -12. So that's something that if you really wanted to fix, you could always throw in an amethyst flask in order to get your chaos resistance over the hump, as it were, over that negative percentage. But you can always just prioritize purchasing things like extra amethyst rings with higher rolls on their chaos resistance, or filling in that chaos resistance either on your gloves or your boots. This is an incredibly cheap build, and once again, it's able to take out Sirus at level 8, something that I have not even yet done on the vast majority of any of the builds that I've created yet for Metamorph. So if you're looking for something that can take out Sirus at tier level 8, or at any tiers, simply because you've never done it before, I would highly recommend Moosseolini's Holy Relic Guardian. Drop us a comment down below. Let us know what you think of this build and whether or not you're going to give it a try here during the Metamorph League or in future leagues. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope today is the day a Mirror of Glandra drops for you. Thanks for watching that video. If you'd like more information on any of our discussion points today, you can see them down below in the video description. If you'd also like to join our Discord or support our Patreon, you can do so with the links down below. Thanks again, and big shout out to all of our Patreon supporters.